Hi, hello. We're doing another list. The top 10 anime of 2019. Now, we've done an entire year of seasonal anime reviews, so all of these shows I've talked about and rated in one of those videos. So we're not going to say too much about any of them again. Probably this list won't be too shocking or surprising, given that you can kind of extrapolate it from the scores that I handed out. But, for the sake of completeness, I thought I would still take another opportunity to talk about them, talk about maybe some special things about them that I hadn't had a chance to mention before. We're only doing top 10, again, because we've already discussed all of these at some point or another. So we're starting off with Senko-san, Seo Yaki Kitsune no Senko-san, the always helpful fox, Senko-san. So if you had told me when this anime was announced that this would only make number 10, I would have called you a blasphemer. Yes, we had quite a cult-like following around this show. We were quite devoted to it as it slowly but steadily grew in popularity. We championed it, and Doga Kobo announcing that they would adapt it was just like a heaven-sent miracle. But I do find that the show has some shortcomings, and back in the review video where we discussed it, I talked about those at some length. It just isn't on the level of godliness that I would have hoped for. I wasn't just expecting a show that was okay, a show that was good enough. Based on the feverish fandom that we had built up around the series, I wanted something truly godly. And it just, didn't measure up to that. But that's okay. There's still a whole lot to love about this show. The manga, I still think, is much more kind of a masterpiece. Not just in its content, but in kind of its signification, what it represents about manga as a medium. That you just have this one guy who has such a pure and personal desire, as we talked about in the review video, just wanting this series to exist for the sake of comforting himself. Rimukoro created it, made it, manifested it into the world. This is one of the great powers of manga, is the ability for just one person with such an unpalpable, perhaps. Oh, my camera's sitting weird. I think that's why the camera was making a rattling sound during the egg video. Oh boy. Hold on. I meant to fix this before the video started. Is that normally where it is? I think? Okay, anyways. Yeah, so that's what manga to me is really all about. Just having this vision and having the means all by yourself to bring it about into the world. And the anime manages to mirror that. Even though it's such a huge collaboration, even though making an anime involves so many people, so many kind of committees and decision makers and things that need evaluation and analysis, that still an extremely personal desire was manifest into this project in a new medium. I think that's quite beautiful. There's still a warmth. There's still this feeling of comfort. All the things that the artist wanted from the manga. The feeling of his life improving, of this better life emerging from his relationship with Senko. There's no compromises made in order to make it more marketable, more palatable to a larger audience, even though so much is invested in it. They're willing to go that hard just on this one person's personal wish for Senko to take care of him. I think that's pretty beautiful. And it even goes further in these directions with stuff like Super Senko-san Time, the first-person segments at the end of the episodes. I wasn't really blown away by those. I thought that kind of detracted from the show. But again, in terms of what it signifies, in terms of it signifying what Doga Kobo was willing to do for Rimugoro's vision, I think it's quite beautiful that it ended up in the show. And all the budget in the world, all of the sakuga, all of the fluid animation, all of the things that we kind of hope for from Doga Kobo, wouldn't have redeemed the show that if it was missing that essential heart, if it wasn't a reflection of that original desire. Okay, moving on, at number 9, we have Oh Maidens in Your Savage Season. And I also kind of have some beef with this show, as we discussed before. But I found that it's really resonated with me. That long after I finished it, certain scenes still keep coming to mind. Certain characters, certain moments and lines of dialogue, I still think about. Aspects of it have actually kind of become part of my aesthetic language. When kind of dealing with some stuff, I don't really want to get into too many details here, but like like certain things in my personal life, I've found that I ended up thinking of like terms and situations from this show as kind of a way to grapple with it, to understand it better. And that's pretty. That means it really is something that made an impact on me, maybe for better or worse, but something I can't really deny that was quite powerful to me. And I think one of the most precious parts of anime is these slices of lives that I won't get to live, that I get to look into a realistic depiction of someone else's life, a life that I know quite plausibly exists, that almost inevitably exists somewhere out there, but is very, very far removed from my own experiences. And this is a great example of that, an unflinching but heartfelt look at a precious and unique moment in someone's life. And I wouldn't trade my appreciation of that, my ability to truly be affected by that, and to have a deep, resonant empathy with these fictional characters living these fictional lives that are so far removed from my own life. The fact that I can be so affected by that, I think, is something really precious. I say precious like boom, boom. It's something, I think I say precious like 12 times more in these slides probably. But it is very precious to me that I can appreciate it so much, that it can matter so much to me. I wouldn't trade that for almost anything. Almost. Next we're going to look at B-stars. I'd say I have beef with this show too, but cows are friends, not food. No, the show is great. I think a hallmark of good world building, and I often talk about this in the context of fantasy shows and isekai shows and things like that, is kind of the floor of interest you have in finding out further details. Like, in a really well-realized world, you want to see everything. You're curious about every aspect of that society. You're curious about every creature that roams that world, about every profession, about every historical figure, about every location, all the minutiae, just because they all carry the charm of that world building, that they all seem to contribute holistically to the more important elements, creates this very, very high floor for your interest level, and that just keeps you so engaged in any of these sort of fantasy worlds. You should be curious about anything and everything. But in Beastars, I am terrified that I am going to learn something I cannot forget. I'm so wary of the world building because so much of the lore is so disturbing, so unsettling, and yet helplessly I find myself drawn to those dark places. I'm terrified, I don't really want to know, and yet some part of myself is so morbidly curious. How could this work? Like, does this actually imply this as it seems to be? Are there really these sorts of incidents in this world? And Legoshi, our main protagonist, the Grey Wolf, I think is such a compelling hero because he as well seems to be in this kind of liminal space where he's afraid to kind of look directly at the world he lives in, afraid to consider the full ramifications of who he is and the society that he has to integrate to, and yet finds himself drawn into these situations, these dramatic, these horrific, these immoral worlds, that it feels like a perfect kind of analogy for the watcher. Such a compelling contrast to all of these strong personalities around him. Everyone else seems to kind of, I don't know, not really even know their place, not really even be comfortable in this world, but certainly trying to like fake it more than Legoshi, certainly trying to act as if everything is normal and okay, And the vulnerability we get in our protagonist is such like a rare quality for an MC of like a shonen series. And I think just the dynamic of the world being so established, the world being so complex and intimidating and huge, and Legoshi kind of weaving his way just on the periphery of it is such an amazing way to engage us in a series like this. Yeah, it's the perfect distance from both us, from the world. There's things we don't know about him. There's things that we don't know about the world. There's things that he doesn't know about the world. There's just this perfect distance where you kind of perceive everything in shades. Everything is a little unfocused, and you don't know. Should I walk closer? Should I run away? Is it a predator? Is it a friend? Next, we're going to talk about how heavy are the dumbbells you lift. I have beef with this show only because it's a good source of protein. Ha ha ha. No, this show is fantastic. I have like basically no complaints about this show at all. And it's a show that I've been able to appreciate more and more as the year went on. It's only quite recently. What? My audio just like maxed out super red. I hope there wasn't a super loud sound on the recording. But only quite recently have I been able to really appreciate the depravity of fitness. So, you know, I go to the gym. Not to brag. Mostly I just run. I really enjoy running. But I go to the gym decently often. And lately, I've been having to deal with the normies who make New Year's resolutions to go to the gym and just flood the place in early January. This is like a yearly occurrence. And the fact that I'm now on the other side of it, that I used to think, who goes to the gym? Like, what normies? Like, they could be watching anime or whatever. And now I'm at the gym. I'm seeing all these people that are like new to the gym. Maybe they don't really know gym etiquette yet. Maybe they're a little apprehensive about things. And I'm like, normies. Like, now I'm on the whole other side of that. I've become such a gym rat. Anyways. And it makes you wonder, like, is this true of everything? Like, any sort of normie hobby, things that you look at it and you're like, wow, that's something for kind of normal people that aren't into super nerdy things like me. But I'm sure if you immersed yourself in that hobby, in the culture around it, in the community, you'd realize that in the end, it's just as depraved. It still has all these tiers of elitism. That in the end, you find yourself looking at the outsiders and thinking, normies will never understand equestrianism or I don't know, whatever normie hobby you can think of. So I think the weirdness of this show, because this is a very, very weird show, honors the weirdness of devotion in just the most general sense. And this is something I think in general anime is quite good at. That it moves to this place of most depravity. It moves to the place where you're not actually gaining any social capital anymore by doing the hobby, but you're just doing it for the sake of the hobby itself, for the sake of the devotion itself even. And it actually still kind of makes it more approachable. And this is a real magical quality of anime, I think. That we have a normie hobby like the gym, something that probably most devoted anime watchers are not that interested in, not that familiar with. Story to stereotype, to paint with a broad brush, but probably a fact. And then you present it in the way that it mirrors the depravity and the devotion of hobbies depicted in other series, as if it was Gunpla, as if it was Airsoft, as if it was fighting games, whatever. You show that it's the same kind of craziness once you're deep into it. It's the same sorts of people that you're meeting. And then I think that actually makes it a lot more approachable. It makes you think, oh, like there's going to be a point at which I start enjoying this that way as well. I'm not just doing it for the sake of appearances. I'm not just doing it to fit in or be cool, but for the opposite, if anything. And I think this is another really precious part of anime, is showing lives that could be yours, showing you areas of life that maybe you hadn't really considered before, and giving you an avenue to get in there by showing the appeal. And this is where the power of idealization really motivates you. It can help bring you into those worlds by showing all the fun times, all the camaraderie, all the friendships you'll make, all the personal growth you'll have in every area of your life. Is it realistic to expect all of those things from starting to go to the gym? Not at all. But wouldn't you still want to go to the gym anyways? Because I think for fitness, this is a moral good. I think people owe it to themselves to try to be in good shape. People owe it to themselves to try to remain healthy so that they can live long, fruitful lives, so that their brains can stay neuroplastic and willing to accept new ideas, and so that they can push themselves and learn the value of pushing yourself, and thus gain that power in all sorts of other arenas of life. I really am becoming quite an exercise devotee, and feel free to call me a normie for it, but if running for hours at the treadmill in the gym, listening to Denpa music on my earbuds makes me a normie, then I guess I'm just a normie. So let's all do some exercise. Come on, let's do it. I promise, honestly, it gets fun. Eventually it gets fun. You have to get used to it. There's a big hurdle at the start where all you really get is the pain, and there's no kind of reciprocal feeling of reward with the pain. But eventually it gets to the point where you're so conditioned that even the pain you start to cherish. Yeah. Next we're going to talk about bocchi. Hitori bocchi no maru maru seikatsu. The joy of friend making as the main plotline. This is something that I will never get tired of. Any series that's structured around the main characters making friends, I think will always be something I'm going to give a try. Shonen series have always understood this. Almost every big battle shonen series, one of the main plot lines is the main character gathering comrades, gathering nakama, getting to know them, bringing them into their team, and taking on bigger and bigger challenges with them at their back. So why not in every other genre too? There's lots of obvious benefits to this sort of writing. As you add friends, you increase the number of entertaining subsets of friends exponentially. Or maybe it's geometrically. I never know the difference between exponential growth and geometric growth. But it goes up real fast is my point. You're increasing the available powers for future situations. So again, you can think of this in terms of shonen stuff. Oh, we've added a sharpshooter to our crew. Now in future plot lines, there can be all sorts of hype developments where our sharpshooter, Sogeking, has lined up a shot. But in this sort of comedy writing, it's the same deal. You get the Ojo-sama, you get the really uptight sounds mean, the self-righteous morals committee girl. You get all of these people with different sets of knowledge, different expectations, different accesses to things in the world. And the types of plot lines you can write just grows and grows and grows. So you can open up all these situations for the future that grow in possibility as the series continues. And then the joy of friendship itself. Because all of this is true for IRL friendships as well. If you make friends in real life, all of these same benefits apply. And sometimes I think we take that for granted. What a wonderful thing friendship is. What a beautiful and miraculous thing it is that we can build up these sorts of relationships in our lives. Isn't it obvious? But sometimes you forget that interpersonal relationships are really the most valuable thing in life. I truly believe this. That there's nothing really that compares to friendship, that compares to the connection you have with another person. That anything you do can be enhanced by connecting with another person through it or because of it. I don't know. I mean, this is maybe a real normie thing to say. It's maybe a disputable point, but I think there's at least a way of living where this is very obviously the most important thing. And we shouldn't forget that. We shouldn't take that for granted. And another really precious thing about anime is giving you a chance to fully believe in these unexamined beliefs once more. So you might believe this, you might think it's obviously true, but maybe you haven't experienced the beauty of that lately. And watching a show like this, watching bocchi make friends, will really make that feeling bloom within yourself once more. Especially since I watched this show with friends. I talked about this in the fall 2019 anime reviews, but I watch Anime Weekly with some friends, And this was the show we watched this season, and it was really nice, you know, sitting there with some friends and thinking about how we became friends and the history of our friendship and all the stuff we had done together. And yeah, oh, what a just lovely experience. Highly recommended. Next, we're talking about Zoku, awadhi monogatari. Fantastic screenshot I've chosen, just saying. So it's kind of like we went from the climax to like the climax, a climax underneath the climax, to just a world of absurdist distortion. You can think of this as first we fought the final boss, and then there was the secret boss, and now a bonus stage that kind of transcends the idea of conflicts and bosses. I don't want to spoil too much, but I think that this sort of structuring, this sort of development is really fascinating, so I hope you'll permit me to talk about it in these real abstract terms. And it was pretty amazing that after a decade plus of watching this series, of kind of orienting myself to the logic of it, to the characters, to the rules of its world, I'm thrown into the wind once more. So it's kind of a good mix of nostalgia that it really feels like starting off with Bakemonogatari again, having to relearn everything that's going on. And yet also progress, that I feel so much more experienced in doing so, that I'm so much quicker in kind of lining everything up, seeing all these inversions of something that I already know. Of course, I'm going to be able to kind of reckon with it much faster. And so I kind of felt like I was looking back on my entire history with this series and seeing the growth that I had had in that period. Some of my favorite moments in the series are those of like baffled serenity, where the plot has reached its most confusing, its most complex. Araragi and perhaps even the other characters are at a total loss of what to do, and yet there's this beautiful calmness that sort of settles over it as they have these long, convoluted discussions about what's happening and the best course of action to take. I don't know, something about those moments feel quite radiant and transcendent to me. I'm not sure if I can quite explain why, but if I just look back at a lot of my favorite settings and scenes, this is something that has in common. And here, it's like, just as this whole, the Zoku in general is about sort of inversions, that's like the new normal. Those scenes don't happen at these sort of climaxes of confusion, but just saturate the entire world of this miniseries. So I really enjoyed that. I really appreciated that. And I think this is quite a fitting farewell to the series. As I said, this mix of nostalgia and progress, I felt quite completing in a sense, but also maybe Shaft as a whole. We won't get into it that much, I guess, but there's a lot of stuff going on with Shaft, and their future projects are looking incredibly sparse. I really don't expect any further Monogatari adaptations. This is probably it, and I don't know if Shaft will ever really make projects I'm excited about anymore. But, you know, for this series at least, hopefully the translations of the light novel will continue, and the manga will run for 100 plus volumes to cover all of the light novels and light novels that are still being written now. Next, we're going to talk about Sarazan Mai. This is a boldly new aesthetic world, and it permeates every single aspect of design, characterization, the society they live in, the depiction of Tokyo. All of it has been Sarazan Maiified. It's something that we expect from Ikuhara, something that he does in every one of his series, that makes every one of his series so memorable and so distinct from the rest. But we really shouldn't take it for granted how fantastic something like that is. The characterization kind of feels pulled forward through mysterious forces, that so much of the behavior and action in this series takes place because of character desires that don't really make too much sense in some way. They act almost inhumanly in some regards, with their devotions, with their passions, with the lengths they'll go to achieve their goals. And it's a testament, I think, to how immersive the otherness of this world is, that we still find this plotline really compelling, that we still empathize with these characters, that we're still very concerned with their happiness and their success. even though they kind of behave like aliens in some regard. And this, I think, is the power in terms of story writing of having such an aesthetically new world, that somehow our suspension of disbelief is shifted, and we embrace all of the things that are happening because we've already embraced the weirdness of what we're seeing, if that makes sense. I think it kind of makes sense. And kind of along these lines, if you look at the most super aspects of the plot, things like leaking, where through supernatural forces, the main characters learn secrets of one another and get to see scenes that weren't depicted beforehand. This is, of course, extremely incongruent with how things work in real life. There is no leaking in the real world in this way. And yet, at this most supernatural moment, we find this like resonating most of all with things in our own life, that we start asking ourselves, what would happen if we leaked? What would come out? What would people see? And again, it's just this fusion of the most bizarre and alien and supernatural, and then like the darkest, most intimate parts of ourselves. Ikuhara, man. Nobody else does it like that. So yeah, even in this wild, unreal world, in this mirror, we glean the darkest sides of ourselves. Amazing. Okay, next is Mob Psycho, Part 2. Sometimes I think this show gets underrated because there's so much impressive stuff going on with the series. Cinematography, choreography, fight scenes, gigantic animation swings, and amazing mixed media styles, and just the characteristic magic of Studio Bones. But I kind of find myself forgetting the most central and important premise, which is, of course, the springtime of youth. This is how the manga starts. This is something that we return to when we think about Mob's motivations. This is like a major theme in so many of the arcs, but kind of bubbling under the surface. And I think anime's ability to depict stories about the springtime of youth, about this time in our lives when everything is fresh and new and everything feels so full of possibility, and there's still a whole world for you to go in any direction towards. The way that anime focuses on these, when so many mediums only tell stories of adulthood, the way that anime brings out the beauty of these things, I think it's something that cannot be overstated. The preciousness of getting these stories when many of us are in the summer of our lives now, maybe even approaching the fall of our lives. So yeah, if you removed all the supernatural elements, and this was just a story of Mob as an unremarkable kid, it would still be a really beautiful, compelling story. Just the character of him, the way he grows, the way he changes himself, the way he becomes so much more notable than Mob would suggest, would still be a fantastic story that would make this list. And so the power of these fight scenes, it isn't just in their choreography and cinematography and stuff, but their significance of characterization as a benchmark of Mob's growth, as a way to see aspects of his character that otherwise we could not. I'm so excited for Part 3. I hope it comes soon. I think it should be able to adapt the rest of the manga. There's some fantastic arcs coming up, ones that relate really specifically to what I'm talking about here. And then also some of the absolute craziest arcs in the entire series, things that are so far out of left field. Oh man, just wait. If you're an anime-only watcher, like, you're in for a treat. Okay, next, at number 2, we have Machikado Mazoku. Lovely shot of Momo here. So as I've been reading the manga, which I think is really amazing, I'm up to date on the English scanlations of it, what I've really started to appreciate more and more is the setting of this series, the town that they all live in. It's a land of infinite possibility, where anything from any walk of fantasy, demons, magical girls, golems, succubi, manifestations, spells, incarnations, magical technology, possession, like every single trope could show up here. each and every one imbued with the signature charm of the series, that it feels distinctly like the Machikado Mazuku version of that trope. So it's kind of like One Piece. I think One Piece is still the gold standard of this, that every trope you can think of that would take place in a world such as One Piece's will probably show up at one point and feel so perfectly like One Piece's version of a giant, a mermaid, a horror world, angelic world. I don't know, whatever. But everything is super cozy too. That even though all this crazy stuff is going on, there's this really soothing sense of the everyday, that this is just how it is, that all of these things are somehow coexisting in harmony. And with these two things combined, the only setting that I can put it in league with is Gensokyo. And I really can't overstate what a compliment this is for me, to say that this series reminds me of Gensyoko, that it reminds me of the world of Toho and the possibility and bliss that I see from there. And watching the plot progress and characters develop in this setting is really compelling, because it doesn't just feel like the characters you love are growing and that all these relationships are becoming more substantial, but that all of these wonderful tropes, all of these exciting things we've yet to see, could be opening up as a result of it. That brand new realms of things that we want to see in this universe are going to be unlocked by this sort of progress. And every sense of progress is possible. Power levels, characters getting stronger, characters getting more knowledgeable, more skillful, skills that will show up as a plot point in future arcs. They become more emotionally mature, and then, perhaps most importantly, their relationships with one another continue to develop, continue to have more of a history, more of a weight behind them, more loving, more trusting. Oh, it's so beautiful. Oh man, everybody who watched this anime and liked it, go on and read the manga. So many cool things are happening. Please give us a season 2. JC staff, please. They give a lot of stuff season 2s. I think most of the shows that are getting sequels are nowhere near this good. There's stuff that they've given like 4 seasons to. Like Don Machi's getting 3 seasons in a spin-off. They've adapted Rail Ducks for years and years and years now. All I want is another season. Well, maybe I want as many seasons as it takes to finish the manga, but more, please, more. It's so good. Okay, so I love this show. I got a 10. You may remember what other show got a 10, which will be appearing here at number 1. Of course, it's Wata-ten. Watashi ni tenshi ga mayorita. Yeah, an angel came down to me, and an anime came down to me. What can you say about this show? In fact, didn't we already talk about this show for like an hour in the Winter 2019 anime reviews video? Haha, just kidding. We didn't really talk about it at all. We just went on a very long discussion of what scores mean and what good art is and how it affects your social capital to rate things one way or the other. We didn't really actually talk about the show at all. And we're still going to try to dodge it here. Let me ask you a question. Really, really think about it. Without changing the premise of the show, without drastically, from the fundamental level, changing what the show is about, what could you possibly do to make this show any better? I ask you. I genuinely am challenging you here to give me one thing. Nothing. There's nothing, right? It's like a perfect show, right? Like, you know, you can have beef with the premise, you can dislike that it's about what it's about, but could you improve it given that? No. I defy you. You could not. I still watch it sometimes. It's so relaxing. It's so familiar at this point. It's so funny. So much of the animation is so good that I'm still like joyfully surprised. So many little details I think are just perfectly executed that I can't help myself. I just keep coming back. I think it's really good Japanese practice now too, because I've seen it so many times I can watch it without subtitles, And so many of the characters speak like so simply that I can follow what they're saying quite well. So it really is embarrassing to admit how much you like this show. I won't deny it. I'm feeling a little embarrassed right now putting it at number one. Yeah, it's just how it is. You gotta be honest with yourself when you make a list. I've experienced this firsthand. You know, I've been at friends' places where we talk about this show, and or we even start watching the show, and other people are like, "What's this? What is this about?" And just you don't want to say, you don't want to try to explain it, you don't want to try to justify it. It just suddenly feels like you're digging yourself into such a deep hole. But look, anime is all about this. Anime is all about sacrificing your social capital, your social standings, the feelings of respect other people might have for you, for precious things. For things that are worth it despite that. For things that are perhaps especially worth it because you have to sacrifice those things. And thus it kind of validates your ability to do so. It's rewarding your skill in being able to embarrass yourself and being able to degrade yourself in the eyes of others to appreciate and enjoy something like this. Anime is all about that, more than any other medium. So watching this show, which you can never mention to anyone, that to me is peak anime. That to me is the exact reason that this genre is, or this medium is so compelling to me for so long. Okay, that's it. Those are my 10 favorites. It's no good way to like scroll through them. I really like doing the slides, but the benefit of making the pictures and just looking at them at Photo Viewer, that we could just like scroll through them really fast, was kind of fun. Anyways, that's it. That's all the anime I'm going to talk about for 2019. And that's all the 2019 list videos in general. So next we're going to be moving on to the decade, to the 2010s. I'm so excited. I hope you're excited too. Bye-bye.